I wanted, when I was a small child, I think first of all to be a ballet dancer, like all little girls. Well, I wasn't much good at ballet, but I was very keen about theatre, and particularly about directing plays. So I used to write plays and direct my friends in those plays when I was kind of between the ages of 6 and 13 or something. But from when I was about 10 onwards, music really began to take over my life, and I stopped writing plays and poetry, and I started writing music. And by the time I was in my teens, I knew that I wanted to study music properly to support the idea of being a composer. And that's what I've always done. For myself, because I was the daughter of a famous professional composer, Elizabeth McConkie, I didn't have the challenges as a teenager and as a student that lots of people have. I was very fortunate, much more fortunate than my mother, who came from Ireland in a family where there wasn't any music. And also, I was a music student in the 1960s, and that was a great time in the UK. There was lots of opportunities for women, and I didn't encounter gender discrimination. Whereas by the 1980s, things had become very conservative and moribund here, and it was much more difficult. And I would see that my students didn't get the kind of opportunities that I'd had when I was a student, if they happened to be female. As for what's the challenge now, well, I guess there's always a bit of a challenge about being an older composer, because the public, or rather the managers who think they know what the public want, they love the young. And there's always a joke in England: you have to be either very young and beautiful, male or female, or an old master. And of course, then if you're an old lady, that's not quite so good. I have to say, I don't feel at all like an old lady. Age doesn't really come into it for me. And so I suppose the challenge now is to wake up everyone to the wonderful repertoire of music that exists that's not being played. Why that should be? Well, there are lots of reasons. I think that by the time I was in my, let's say, in my 30s, and indeed by the time I'd become a mother, then I was very aware of the enormous debt to my mother. I probably wasn't aware of it as a child and as a teenager, because quite honestly you aren't. You're kind of walking on beyond your parents, and you don't think about those things a lot. Life is too exciting and full of the present, and past and future don't mean a lot. But without a doubt, having the model of my mother, who she never swayed from her vocation as a composer. She was very professional and extremely hardworking, very energetic, and yet she had all kinds of obstacles to overcome. She had tuberculosis very, very badly in the 1930s when there was no cure, so she couldn't live in the city, she couldn't live in London or Dublin and be networking and that kind of thing. She had to live in the country, live an outdoor life, and she had great success at the beginning of her career. Performed at the proms and rave notices, and she had success at the end of her career when she was very much commissioned by leading ensembles and so on, and made a dame of the British Empire. But in the middle of her life, she was really very forgotten and neglected, and that, it was very depressing for her. But she didn't lose heart. She went on composing. She never looked back, and I think that was a very good model for myself, because I've had some wonderful opportunities. On the other hand, I clearly haven't had things like, major opera house commissions, and I waited years and years and years before I got another big orchestral commission. So I think it's great to have that model of you get on and compose. Yeah. I do love the voice. I love writing for voice. It is the first instrument, really. It's the direct expression of the person. And also, because of my love of opera and theatre, from 2 points of view, I love the traditional operatic repertoire. When you asked about influences on me, I should probably have said Mozart and directing The Marriage of Figaro when I was in my teens. But at the same time, I wouldn't only want to write vocal music and music theatre or operatic music, because if I'm writing something like a string quartet, that's, say, almost pure music. There's nothing to distract you, whereas as soon as you work with theatre, you're writing a hybrid work. It's not just music. And so I need both. I need the discipline and indeed the excitement of exploring pure music. How do you make it comprehensible to people? It's completely its own language. And then on the other hand, there's a joy of finding a poem that is really enticing, and you think, I'd love to set that, and you make a song, and that's much easier for the audience for a start, because they have a text to follow. And I'm rather predatory as a composer because I love setting words, and so I will race through anthologies until I find what I want. All right, now I've just finished a solo violin piece for my friend Peter Shepherd-Skevert, wonderful violinist, and it's something I've never actually done before because it's a piece based on a wood carving, and the wood carving is, the title is King David performing a motet by Orlando de Lassus. So in the violin piece, I try and capture the characters of the dancing cherubs, the King Davids, and Cecilia, a woman controlling all the music making of Psalm 150, and then finally by the end Lassus's music comes into my music, so that by the end the violin is actually playing a transcription of Lassus. So that's been lovely, a small piece to do but a nice piece to do. And Peter Shepherd will play it in buildings which have Grinling Gibbons carvings. We have that particular carving in York, in Fairfax House, but he will play it in St Paul's Cathedral and other places where there are Grinling Gibbons carvings. Gibbons was Charles II's master carver.
Nice, wonderful.
So it was very interesting to... I have in the past worked with old music in my opera Light Passing, which is set in medieval 14th century France, and I use real French polyphony and plain chant woven into my music because the opera is about a pope. So I think on the one hand it's very important to study a lot, but I also think it's very important to write what you want to write and not to think about what other people want. Because if you try and please people, if you want to be liked, I think that's very dangerous. I don't think composers should pay any attention to wanting to be liked. And indeed, sometimes a young composer has a lot of success and then it's quite hard for them because there's so much in the public eye, they can't make mistakes. And I think by studying hard, I mean really getting inside the music that's being written now, the music of their own peers, their own generation, playing it. Composers surely must play as well as listen and analyse.